There is a place in the world called Shadow Canyon, a deep and peaceful valley where the tall, gentle cliffs lean in so close that they almost kiss the sky. The sun never shines directly here, but instead the light filters down in a soft, dreamy, perpetual twilight. In this quiet place, nestled into the base of the great cliff, was the workshop of Silas, the lantern maker. His home was carved from the rock itself, with a round wooden door and windows made of thin, polished sheets of crystal that collected and amplified the dim light. Silas was the canyon's keeper, its heart, and its only resident. He had lived there for more years than there were stars in the sky, and he loved its deep, calming silence. His workshop was a place of warmth and wonder. It smelled of old wood, beeswax, and the faint, sweet scent of glowing moss. Shelves upon shelves were filled with the most beautiful lanterns imaginable. Some were made of delicate, twisted willow branches, others of hammered copper, and some were carved from the very crystals found deep within the canyon. Each lantern was a work of art, crafted with patience and love, but the magic was not in the lantern itself. The magic was in the light that it held. For Silas did not use candles or fire. He was the keeper of the world's last heart-embers, and it was these that made his home, and the entire canyon, a place of gentle, living light. At the center of Silas's workshop, on a large, flat stone table, was a bed of soft, cool moss. Nestled upon this moss were the heart-embers. There were about a dozen of them, each a smooth, warm stone that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic golden orange light. They were the last remnants of the great heart of the sleeping mountain, which stood at the very end of the canyon. Long ago, the mountain had shared these embers to keep the canyon warm and safe. They were not hot to the touch. Instead, they radiated a gentle, comforting warmth, like holding a tiny, sleeping sun in your hands. This warmth kept the mosses green and the night-blooming flowers open, and it kept the deep chill of the canyon at bay. Silas's most important job was to care for them. Every morning, he would greet them with a soft song, and every evening, he would tell them a story of the world outside the canyon. He would take one of the embers and carefully place it inside a new lantern he had finished. As soon as the ember was enclosed, the lantern would come alive, its crystal panels or patterned copper casting beautiful, dancing shapes of light and shadow upon the walls. This was how he filled the canyon with light. He would hang the finished lanterns on the branches of the ancient, gnarled trees that grew along the canyon floor, creating a winding path of soft, golden light that made the quiet valley feel safe and endlessly peaceful. The light from the heart-embers was special. It was a light that didn't chase away all the shadows, but danced with them in perfect, gentle harmony. For as long as Silas could remember, the light of the heart-embers had been steady and strong. But lately, he had noticed a change. One evening, as he went to tell the embers their nightly story, he saw that their beautiful, golden orange glow was a little weaker than before. Their rhythmic pulse, which had always been as steady as a sleeping heartbeat, was now slower and a little fainter. He reached out his hand and placed it over them, and he could feel that their gentle, life-giving warmth was also beginning to fade. A deep and profound sadness filled him. He looked around his workshop, and the lanterns that hung from the ceiling seemed a little dimmer, the dancing shadows on the walls a little darker and colder. He looked out his crystal window and saw that the path of lanterns leading down the canyon had lost some of its cheerful glow. The night-blooming flowers, which relied on the embers' warmth, had not opened as wide as they usually did. The heart-embers were the life of the canyon, and they were growing tired. Silas knew in his old, wise bones what this meant. The great heart of the sleeping mountain, the source of all the embers, was growing weak. If its light went out completely, the embers would fade to cold, grey stone, and his beautiful, gentle canyon would be plunged into a cold and permanent darkness. Silas knew he could not let the light go out. The canyon was his home, and the embers were his sacred trust. Though his bones were old and his steps were slow, he knew he had to make a journey to the heart of the sleeping mountain. He had not made the long walk down the canyon in many, many years, but his resolve was strong. He packed a small, simple satchel with a piece of bread, a flask of fresh spring water, and one of the healthiest looking heart-embers, which he wrapped in soft wool to protect its gentle light. He took his favorite walking stick, carved from the wood of a rowan tree, and pulled on his warmest patched cloak. He looked around his cozy, familiar workshop one last time, his gaze lingering on the shelves of beautiful, dimming lanterns. He whispered a promise to them, a promise to return with a renewed warmth and a brighter light. With a deep breath that filled his old lungs with the cool, twilight air, he opened his round, wooden door and stepped out into the canyon. The path of lanterns before him looked like a trail of fading stars, each one a silent plea for him to hurry. He was old, and the journey would be long, but his heart was filled with a quiet, unwavering determination to save his home. Silas began his slow, steady journey, following the winding path of dimming lanterns deeper into the canyon. The further he walked from his workshop, the darker and colder the air became. The familiar, comforting warmth of the embers was gone, replaced by a damp chill that seemed to cling to the very rocks themselves. The glowing moss that grew on the canyon walls was no longer bright, its light faded to a pale, ghostly green. The night-blooming flowers that should have been wide open were now tightly closed, their petals shut against the growing cold. The only sounds were the soft tapping of his walking stick on the stone path and the gentle whisper of the wind as it sighed through the high cliffs above. It was a lonely walk, and the deep, encroaching shadows seemed to stretch out towards him like long, cold fingers. For the first time in his long life, Silas felt a little bit of fear. The canyon, his beloved home, felt like a stranger, a place, losing its life and its magic. He clutched the satchel with the single ember a little tighter, its faint warmth a small comfort against the growing cold. He thought of the mountain, still so far away, and wondered if he, one small, old man, had the strength to make it there in time. As Silas walked through the deepest, darkest part of the canyon, he saw a flicker of movement in the shadows ahead. He stopped, his old heart beating a little faster. He peered into the darkness and saw two luminous, amethyst-purple eyes staring back at him. They were large and bright, and they did not seem menacing, only curious. Slowly, a creature stepped out from behind a large boulder. It had the sleek, graceful shape of a fox, but its body was made not of fur, but of living, solidified shadow, its outlines soft and slightly blurry like smoke. It was Kale, a shadow fox, a creature as old and as shy as the canyon itself. Silas had only ever caught fleeting glimpses of the shadow fox before, as it was a creature that never came near the light of the embers. He stood perfectly still, knowing that any sudden movement would scare it away. The fox tilted its head, its glowing purple eyes looking not at Silas, but at the small, warm glow coming from his satchel. It took a hesitant step closer, its movements completely silent. Silas, understanding, slowly opened his satchel and took out the wool-wrapped heart-ember. He knelt down, his old knees creaking, and gently placed the warm, pulsing stone on the path between them. It was an offering, a gesture of peace and trust. Kale, the shadow fox, stared at the gently pulsing heart-ember for a long time. It had always stayed in the deepest shadows, away from the warmth and light that filled the rest of the canyon. But this one small light did not feel threatening. It felt kind. It felt like the gentle old man who was offering it. Slowly, with a grace that was breathtaking to watch, the shadow fox crept forward. It lowered its smoky head and gently nudged the warm ember with its nose. A soft purple shimmer ran through its shadowy body, a sign of contentment. It looked up at Silas, and its luminous purple eyes blinked once, a silent message of thanks and understanding. Silas smiled, a deep and genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He had made a friend, he explained, in a soft, low voice, where he was going and why. He spoke of the fading embers and the sleeping mountain. Kale listened intently, its head tilted. When Silas was finished, the fox picked up the heart-ember gently in its mouth, turned, and looked back at Silas, as if to say, "Follow me. I know the way." Silas knew at once that he could trust this creature. The fox knew the secret paths of the canyon, the ways through the deepest shadows where he had never walked. His lonely journey was lonely no more. He had found a guide in the most unexpected of places. Kale led Silas away from the main path and into the deeper shadows along the canyon wall. The fox moved with a silent, confident grace, the glowing ember in its mouth acting as their own personal, moving lantern. It led him to a fissure in the rock that Silas had never noticed before, a crack just wide enough for him to squeeze through. Inside, they entered a magnificent crystal cave. The walls and ceiling were covered in huge, pointed crystals that absorbed the faint light from the ember and reflected it 1,000 times over. The entire cave was filled with a soft, shifting, rainbow-colored light. But the most magical part was the sound. A soft, humming, whispering sound filled the air. Silas realized that the crystals were whispering stories to each other. Ancient tales of the earth's slow creation, of the mountains rising and the rivers being born. It was a place of deep, geological magic. The path through the cave was treacherous. But Kale knew the way, its shadowy form weaving effortlessly between the giant crystal formations. The fox would pause every so often, waiting for Silas to catch up, its purple eyes glowing with a patient encouragement. This cave was a shortcut, a secret path through the heart of the canyon wall, and without his new, shadowy friend, Silas, would never have found it. He walked in a state of reverent awe, listening to the earth's oldest lullabies and feeling closer to the heart of the mountain than ever before. After what felt like a lifetime of walking through the beautiful, whispering cave, they emerged into a vast, circular cavern deep within the base of the sleeping mountain. The air here was incredibly still and ancient, and it felt warm, like the inside of a living thing. At the very center of the cavern, there was a single, colossal, perfectly smooth and seamless wall of dark, polished rock. It was a perfect circle, like a giant, sealed door. This, Silas knew, was the entrance to the mountain's very heart, the chamber where the great heart-ember that gave life to all the others resided. But there was no handle, no keyhole, no way to open it. Kale, the shadow fox, gently placed the ember at the base of the stone door and then retreated to Silas's side. Its work as a guide now done. It looked up at Silas with its luminous purple eyes, as if to say, "Now it is your turn." Silas looked at the immense, silent door. He could feel the weak, fading pulse of the great heart within, a slow, tired rhythm that was on the verge of stopping forever. He knew that trying to push the door open with force would be useless. This was not a door of stone, but a door of spirit. It could not be forced open. It had to be invited. Silas took a deep breath, calming his beating heart. He remembered what the old stories said. The great heart of the mountain had not been broken or diminished. It had simply fallen into a deep, sad sleep after centuries of being alone. It had grown weary of shining its light with no one to share it with. It needed to be reminded that it was not forgotten, that its warmth and light was still loved and needed. Silas placed his wrinkled, gentle hands flat against the cool surface of the stone door. He closed his eyes and tried to send all of his warmth, all of his gratitude, and all of his love for the canyon through his palms and into the mountain's heart. He thought of the glowing moss, the night-blooming flowers, and the beautiful, dancing shadows in his workshop. He thought of all the peace and comfort the embers had given him over his long, long life. He focused all of these happy, grateful memories, trying to wake the sleeping heart with the power of his love. He could feel its pulse quicken just a little, a faint response to his efforts. But it wasn't enough. The heart was too deep in its slumber, too lost in its lonely dreams. He knew that feelings alone would not be enough to wake it. It needed something more. It needed a song. Silas was not a great singer. His voice was old and a little raspy, and he couldn't sing the loud, grand songs of kings or heroes. But he knew one kind of song very well. He knew the quiet, simple lullabies that he would hum to the heart-embers in his workshop every evening. And so, standing there in the heart of the earth, he began to sing. He sang a soft, gentle lullaby, a song about the warmth of a hearth on a cold night, about the safety of a cozy home, and about the deep, peaceful sleep that follows a day of happy work. His voice was not strong, but it was full of pure, honest kindness. He sang of his love for the canyon, of his friendship with the shadows, and of his gratitude for the light that had kept him safe for all his years. Kale, the shadow fox, crept closer and lay down at his feet, its head on its paws, listening to the gentle melody. The song was not meant to wake the mountain with a jolt, but to gently coax it from its sad dreams, to remind it that it was loved. It was a lullaby, not for putting to sleep, but for waking up. A song to remind the heart of all the beauty it had created and all the love that was waiting for it. As Silas finished his gentle song, the last notes echoing softly in the vast cavern, a deep, resonant hum began to emanate from the stone door. It was a sound of something ancient and powerful, slowly waking up. A thin, horizontal crack of brilliant, golden-orange light appeared in the center of the seamless rock wall. The light was so warm and so pure, it felt like the first sunrise the world had ever seen. The crack grew wider and wider, the door of stone silently parting. From the middle, not with a grinding of rock, but with the silent, graceful unfolding of a flower petal. The warm, golden light poured out into the cavern, washing over Silas and Kale, chasing away the last of the deep shadows and filling the entire space with a life-giving warmth. The single heart ember at the base of the door, which had been so dim, now pulsed with a new and powerful energy, its own light growing twice as bright as it drank in the warmth of its parent. The mountain was waking up. Silas's quiet, gentle song had reached its lonely heart and reminded it of its purpose. The lullaby had worked. The heart was no longer sleeping, and its beautiful light was returning to the world. The two halves of the great stone door slid silently and completely into the walls of the cavern, revealing the chamber within. Silas and Kale stood at the threshold, looking in with breathless awe. The chamber was not a cave of rock, but a space of pure, living light. At its center, floating in the air, was the great heart-ember. It was a colossal, perfectly smooth sphere of the most brilliant, beautiful, golden orange light, and it pulsed with a slow, strong, and incredibly powerful heartbeat that sent waves of warmth and energy through the cavern. It was no longer dim or tired. It was vibrant, radiant, and fully awake. As they watched, a tiny piece of the great heart, a single, new ember, broke away from the main sphere and floated gently through the air towards them. It came to a stop directly in front of Silas, hovering at the height of his chest. It was a gift, it was a thank you, and it was a promise. A promise that the mountain would never fall into such a deep sadness again, and that its light would continue to keep the canyon warm and safe for all the years to come. Silas reached out and gently took the new ember in his hands. It was incredibly warm and pulsed with a joyful, vibrant energy. With the new, bright ember held safely in his satchel, Silas and Cale made their journey back. They walked back through the whispering crystal cave, but now the crystals shone with a brilliant, dazzling light, reflecting the newfound strength of the mountain's heart. When they emerged back into the canyon, the world was transformed. The deep, cold shadows were gone, replaced by a soft, beautiful, and all-encompassing golden-orange glow. Every lantern that Silas had ever made, no matter how old or how far away, was now shining with a brilliant, steady light. The glowing moss on the walls was vibrant and alive, and the night-blooming flowers were all fully open. Their petals turned towards the source of the warmth, their sweet scent filling the air. The canyon was no longer a place of perpetual twilight, but a valley of gentle, eternal dawn. It was more beautiful than Silas had ever seen it. He could hear the cheerful chirping of crickets and the happy rustle of leaves, sounds that had been silenced by the growing cold. Life and warmth had returned to his home. He looked down at the shadow fox trotting silently beside him, and he knew that none of it would have been possible without his quiet, shadowy friend. When they arrived back at the workshop, all the heart-embers on the mossy table were pulsing with a bright, happy, and unified rhythm. Silas returned the new ember to join its family, and it settled in with a happy pulse. His work was done. Cale, the shadow fox, stood silently at the open door, knowing it was time for him to return to the deep shadows that were his home. But Silas stopped him. "Wait, my friend," he said softly. He went to his workbench and picked up a very special lantern he had made long ago. It was crafted from the darkest, smoothest river stones and panels of smoky, dark crystal. It was a lantern designed not to banish shadows, but to complement them. He carefully took the ember that Cale had first nudged, the one that had started their friendship, and placed it inside. He handed the lantern to the fox. "So you will never have to be without warmth, even in the deepest dark," Silas said. Cale looked at the beautiful lantern, then up at Silas, and its luminous purple eyes shone with a deep and profound gratitude. The little fox took the lantern's handle gently in its mouth, gave Silas one last, thankful nod, and disappeared silently back into the now friendly shadows of the canyon, leaving his own small, warm light glowing in the distance. And so, Silas and Cale kept the canyon safe and bright, a testament to the friendship between light and shadow. Now, it's time for your own journey into dreams. Close your eyes, feel the warmth of your own cozy bed, and let it guide you to a peaceful sleep. Good night, and sleep well. If you enjoyed our fable tonight, we hope you'll join us again. Please like and subscribe to Bedtimes Fable to help us share more gentle stories with the world. Sweet dreams.